If you are a man over 60, listen very carefully to this. The biggest mistake older men make today is not losing money, not losing their health, and not even ending up alone. It is allowing the wrong woman to enter their life and quietly take away the very thing they spent decades working to build, their peace. That may sound harsh, and some people will disagree with it immediately, but stay with me until the end because what we're about to discuss could save you years of stress, regret, and emotional exhaustion. Before we go any further, I want you to think about your own life for a moment. Have you ever reached a stage where peace became more valuable than excitement? Have you ever looked back and realized that some of the greatest struggles in your life didn't come from work, money, or even health challenges, but from relationships that slowly drained your energy? If that resonates with you, then you're in exactly the right place. My name is Lauren Garcia, and I'm the host of the Lauren's Psychology Diary YouTube channel. Today, we're going to explore a topic that many people avoid because it's uncomfortable, yet it affects countless men every single day. And I want you to know something important right from the start. This conversation is not about blaming women. It is not about encouraging isolation. It is not about convincing anyone to avoid love. Instead, it is about understanding human psychology, emotional well-being, and the hidden costs that can appear when relationships are chosen from loneliness rather than wisdom. You see, by the time a man reaches his 60s, something profound has happened. He has already spent decades proving himself to the world. He has likely worked hard, supported family members, paid bills, overcome disappointments, endured losses, and carried responsibilities that younger people can barely imagine. When you're 25, life feels like an endless horizon. When you're 35, you're building. When you're 45, you're carrying. When you're 55, you're evaluating. But when you reach 60 and beyond, something shifts psychologically. You begin asking different questions. Instead of asking, how much more can I achieve? You start asking, how do I want to spend the years I have left? Instead of asking, who will be impressed by me? You begin asking, who genuinely brings peace into my life? Those are completely different questions, and the answers often lead to surprising realizations. One of the biggest realizations is that emotional energy becomes one of the most valuable resources a person possesses. Most people understand financial budgeting. Few understand emotional budgeting. Think about that for a moment. Every conversation costs energy. Every conflict costs energy. Every misunderstanding costs energy. Every unnecessary drama costs energy. When you're younger, you can afford emotional waste. You recover quickly. You bounce back. You have decades ahead of you. But after 60, emotional energy becomes precious. Psychologists often talk about something called emotional bandwidth. It refers to your mental and emotional capacity to handle life's demands. As people age, they often become more selective, not because they become selfish, but because they become aware of their limitations. They understand that every emotional investment comes with a price. Imagine a man named Robert. Robert is 67 years old. He spent 40 years working as an engineer. He raised 2 children. He paid off his mortgage. He finally reached retirement and began enjoying simple pleasures. Morning coffee, walking his dog, reading books, meeting old friends, watching sunsets from his porch. Nothing extraordinary, yet he felt peaceful. Then he met someone. At first, everything seemed wonderful. The excitement returned. The constant phone calls felt flattering. The attention felt refreshing. The companionship seemed exactly what he had been missing. But slowly, subtle changes appeared. Arguments started over small things. His need for quiet time was interpreted as distance. His desire to spend a weekend alone became a source of conflict. His routines began revolving around avoiding disagreements. Without realizing it, Robert was no longer organizing his life around peace. He was organizing it around emotional management. And this is where many men become trapped. Not because they are weak, not because they are foolish, but because emotional exhaustion arrives quietly. It doesn't announce itself. It creeps in. One compromise, one obligation, one uncomfortable conversation at a time. Many people assume loneliness is the greatest threat facing older men. In reality, emotional exhaustion can be far more destructive. Loneliness hurts, but chronic emotional stress changes who you are. It affects your patience. It affects your confidence. It affects your sleep. It affects your ability to enjoy life. Research consistently shows that ongoing emotional stress activates the body's stress response system. Over time, this can contribute to fatigue, anxiety, irritability, and even physical health problems. What many men fail to recognize is that not every relationship reduces loneliness. Some relationships simply replace loneliness with stress, and stress is not companionship. This is why emotional maturity becomes so important later in life. Emotionally mature people understand that a relationship should not constantly feel like work. Yes, every Every relationship requires effort. Yes, every relationship requires compromise. But there is a significant difference between healthy effort and constant emotional labor. Healthy effort feels meaningful. Constant emotional labor feels draining. One leaves you energized, the other leaves you depleted. If you've ever spent time with someone and felt strangely exhausted afterward, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Have you ever had a conversation where you felt you needed to carefully monitor every word? Have you ever felt responsible for keeping someone else emotionally stable? Have you ever found yourself sacrificing your own peace to avoid conflict? If so, leave a comment below and tell me your experience. Your story may help someone else recognize patterns they haven't yet noticed in their own life. Now let's talk about something even more difficult. Because emotional exhaustion often opens the door to another psychological vulnerability that many older men underestimate, and that vulnerability is loneliness-driven decision-making. Loneliness is fascinating from a psychological perspective. Most people imagine loneliness as sitting alone in an empty room, but that's rarely how it works. Loneliness is often much more subtle. Sometimes it appears as restlessness. Sometimes it appears as boredom. Sometimes it appears as a feeling that something is missing, even when life is objectively good. The human brain is wired for connection. We all need meaningful relationships, but meaningful connection and romantic attachment are not always the same thing. That's a distinction many people never learn. A man retires. His daily structure disappears. The workplace interactions vanish. The routine conversations stop. His children are busy with their own lives. The house feels quieter. Naturally, he begins searching for connection. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem arises when he assumes that a romantic relationship is the only solution. Because sometimes what he actually needs is purpose. Sometimes he needs community. Sometimes he needs friendship. Sometimes he needs a new challenge. Sometimes he needs a reason to get out of bed excited each morning. Psychology teaches us that purpose is one of the strongest predictors of life satisfaction, particularly in later adulthood. People who maintain meaningful goals often report greater happiness than those who simply seek pleasure. Think about the difference. Pleasure feels good temporarily. Purpose creates lasting fulfillment. A new relationship can provide pleasure. But if purpose is missing, the deeper emptiness often remains. That's why some people jump from relationship to relationship without ever feeling satisfied. They're trying to solve an internal problem with an external solution. And external solutions rarely fix internal emptiness. I once heard a psychologist say something powerful. He said, "The loneliest people are not always alone. Sometimes they're surrounded by people who cannot meet their deepest emotional needs." Think about that. You can be alone and feel peaceful. You can be in a relationship and feel profoundly lonely. The difference is not proximity. The difference is emotional alignment. This is why the most fulfilled men over 60 often share one common characteristic. They build lives that stand on their own. Their happiness doesn't depend entirely on another person. They have interests. They have routines. They have goals. They have friendships. They have activities that create meaning. As a result, relationships become a bonus rather than a necessity. And psychologically, that changes everything. Because when you don't need someone to rescue you from loneliness, you're free to evaluate them objectively. You can ask important questions. Do I genuinely enjoy being around this person? Do they respect my boundaries? Do they support my well-being? Do they bring peace into my life? Or am I simply afraid of being alone? That last question is one of the most powerful questions a person can ever ask themselves. Because fear often disguises itself as love. Fear of loneliness, fear of aging, fear of being forgotten, fear of spending the future alone. Those fears are understandable, but decisions made from fear rarely lead to lasting happiness. The healthiest relationships are usually formed by two people who are already emotionally complete. Not perfect, not flawless, but complete. They are not looking for someone to save them. They are looking for someone to share life with. And there is a tremendous difference between those two motivations. In a moment, we're going to discuss one of the most misunderstood psychological traps older men face: the dangerous confusion between attention and genuine respect. And what you're about to hear may completely change the way you view relationships, attraction, and emotional fulfillment after 60. One of the biggest psychological traps older men fall into is confusing attention with respect. At first, the difference seems insignificant. In fact, when someone shows interest in you, the two can feel almost identical. A woman calls you frequently. She wants to spend time with you. She compliments you. She asks about your day. She appears fascinated by your experiences and stories. After years of feeling invisible, especially after retirement, divorce, or the loss of a spouse, that attention can feel incredibly powerful. It can awaken emotions emotions that have been dormant for years. Suddenly you feel seen again, valued again, important again. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with enjoying that feeling. The problem begins when attention becomes the foundation of the relationship. Because attention is easy, respect is difficult. Attention can be given for countless reasons. Respect comes from character. Attention can disappear overnight. Respect remains during difficult moments. Attention focuses on what you provide. Respect values who you are. Psychologically speaking, attention activates reward systems in the brain. It creates positive emotional responses. It feels good. But feeling good and being treated well are not always the same thing. Many older men become so grateful for attention that they stop asking deeper questions. Questions like, does this person respect my boundaries? Does this person respect my time? Does this person appreciate my values? Does this person support my independence? Does this person genuinely care about my well-being? Or do they simply enjoy the benefits I provide? These questions matter because the wrong relationship rarely starts with obvious warning signs. Most unhealthy dynamics begin pleasantly. They begin with attraction, comfort, excitement, connection. Only later do the subtle patterns emerge. Perhaps your opinions begin carrying less weight. Perhaps your personal space becomes harder to protect. Perhaps your preferences are constantly dismissed. Perhaps your needs are always secondary. And before long, you're making sacrifices that would have seemed unreasonable at the beginning. This is how dependency quietly develops. Not through dramatic events, through small compromises repeated over time. The human mind is remarkably adaptable. Unfortunately, that adaptability can work against us. We gradually become accustomed to situations that once would have bothered us. We normalize behavior that once felt unacceptable. We lower standards we once considered non-negotiable. And often, we do it because we're afraid of losing the attention we've become emotionally attached to. But here's something emotionally healthy people understand. Attention is not proof of love. Attention is not proof of compatibility. Attention is not proof of respect. Real respect reveals itself in consistency, in honesty, in boundaries, in mutual consideration, in the ability to disagree without manipulation, and perhaps most importantly, in the ability to support another person's individuality rather than control it. This brings us to another issue many men underestimate until it's already affecting their lives: the gradual loss of freedom. Freedom is a fascinating concept because most people don't appreciate it until it's gone. When you're younger, freedom often means adventure. After 60, freedom usually means peace. It means controlling your own schedule, choosing how you spend your mornings, deciding where your energy goes, living according to your own rhythm. That rhythm becomes incredibly valuable later in life. Imagine waking up without alarms, having breakfast when you want, spending time on hobbies you genuinely enjoy, meeting friends when it suits you, traveling when you choose, enjoying silence without feeling obligated to fill it. Many older men spend decades working toward exactly that kind of freedom. Then, without realizing it, they slowly surrender pieces of it. Not because someone forces them, because expectations gradually accumulate. Every relationship involves compromise. Healthy relationships certainly do. But compromise becomes dangerous when it consistently moves in only one direction. When your schedule constantly adapts while theirs remains unchanged. When your preferences repeatedly take second place. When your routines disappear to accommodate someone else's expectations. Little by little, the life you built begins revolving around maintaining harmony. And one day you notice something strange. You're no longer living according to your own priorities. You're managing someone else's. That realization can be surprisingly painful, because many people assume freedom and companionship are opposites. They are not. Healthy companionship should coexist with freedom. Healthy love should not require the abandonment of individuality. The strongest relationships are built between two complete people, not one person disappearing into another's world. Unfortunately, many older men discover this lesson only after they've already sacrificed significant portions of their independence. But the consequences don't stop there, because freedom is closely connected to another essential part of well-being: identity. One of the most overlooked dangers in any unhealthy relationship is the gradual erosion of personal identity. This process happens so slowly that most people never notice it in real time. At first, the changes seem harmless. You skip a hobby occasionally, you spend less time with friends, you alter a routine, you change a preference, you avoid certain topics, you remain silent during disagreements. Each adjustment feels small, reasonable even, but human identity is built from thousands of small daily choices. When enough of those choices change, something deeper begins to shift. You stop feeling like yourself. And that experience is more common than many people realize. Psychologists often describe identity as the story we tell ourselves about who we are, our values, our interests, our habits, our beliefs, our priorities. When those things become consistently suppressed, psychological discomfort emerges. You may not immediately recognize it. Instead, it appears as frustration, restlessness, irritability, fatigue, a vague feeling that something isn't right. Many people mistakenly interpret these feelings as relationship problems. In reality, they are often identity problems. The person isn't necessarily reacting reacting to their partner. They're reacting to the loss of themselves. This is why emotionally healthy relationships should expand your identity rather than shrink it. The right person encourages your growth, supports your passions, respects your individuality, celebrates your uniqueness. The wrong person gradually replaces your identity with their expectations, and no amount of companionship is worth losing yourself. Now let's talk about something even more serious. Your health. Because after 60, emotional well-being and physical well-being become deeply interconnected. You may have noticed that stress affects you differently now than it did 20 or 30 years ago. A sleepless night feels heavier. Recovery takes longer. Mental tension lingers. Your body responds differently. This isn't weakness, it's biology. As we age, our systems become more sensitive to chronic stress. Research has consistently shown links between prolonged stress and elevated blood pressure, poorer sleep quality, weakened immune function, increased inflammation, and reduced overall quality of life. What many people fail to recognize is that emotional conflict affects the body even when the conflict appears minor. Repeated arguments, constant tension, walking on eggshells, anticipating criticism, managing another person's unpredictable moods. These experiences activate stress responses again and again. Eventually, the nervous system pays the price. That's why protecting your peace is not merely an emotional preference. It becomes a health strategy, a medical strategy, a longevity strategy. Many older men dedicate enormous effort toward maintaining physical health. They exercise, they eat better, they attend doctor appointments, they monitor medications, they prioritize fitness. Yet they remain involved in emotionally draining situations that quietly undermine all of those efforts. Think about that contradiction. You can eat perfectly, exercise regularly, take every recommended supplement, and still damage your well-being if chronic emotional stress dominates your daily life. Peace is not laziness. Peace is maintenance. Peace is protection. Peace is medicine. And the wisest people eventually learn that preserving inner calm may be one of the most valuable investments they ever make. At this point, some viewers may be wondering whether all relationships after 60 are problematic. The answer is absolutely not. In fact, healthy relationships can bring extraordinary benefits: emotional support, companionship, shared experiences, laughter, affection, encouragement, a sense of belonging. The issue is not relationships themselves. The issue is entering relationships without wisdom, without self-awareness, without standards. The most fulfilled men over 60 are not necessarily avoiding relationships. They're evaluating them differently. They no longer ask, "Do I want this person?" Instead, they ask, "Does this relationship improve my life?" That's a far more powerful question, because attraction can be temporary. Peace tends to be sustainable. Chemistry can be exciting. Compatibility tends to be enduring. Attention can be flattering. Respect tends to be transformative. And once a man understands those distinctions, his entire approach to companionship changes. He becomes more selective, more patient, more intentional. He stops chasing. He starts evaluating. He stops fearing solitude. He starts appreciating it. He stops seeking validation. He starts protecting his well-being. And eventually he discovers something remarkable. Fulfillment and romance are not the same thing. Society spends decades teaching people that happiness comes from finding the right person. But life experience often teaches a different lesson. The happiest people are usually those who first create a meaningful life and then share it with the right people, not the other way around. The most content men I've encountered are rarely sitting around waiting for someone to rescue them from boredom. They're busy living. They have friendships, interests, projects, communities, goals, experiences. They wake up with purpose, and because they already enjoy their lives, they can afford to be selective. They don't invite people into their lives out of desperation. They invite people into their lives out of genuine compatibility. That distinction changes everything, because when you're no longer afraid of being alone, you become much harder to manipulate, much harder to pressure, much harder to control. You gain the freedom to make decisions based on wisdom rather than fear. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. The goal after 60 is not simply finding companionship. The goal is protecting the quality of the life you've spent decades creating. A healthy relationship should add peace, not pressure, support, not stress, freedom, not restriction, growth, not self-sacrifice. At the end of the day, every man must make his own choices. No video can make those choices for you. But wisdom often begins with a simple question. Not, "Do I want this person?" Not, "Am I attracted to this person?" Not even, "Will this person make me happy?" Ask yourself this instead. How do I feel after spending time with this person? Do I feel calmer, stronger, more respected, more myself? Or do I feel drained, anxious, controlled, exhausted? That single question can reveal more than months of wishful thinking. If you've stayed with me until this point, I'd love to hear your perspective. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe companionship after 60 improves life? Or do you think protecting peace becomes the higher priority? And if this conversation gave you something meaningful to reflect on, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Lauren's Psychology Diary, and share it with someone who may need to hear it. Remember this, your time is valuable, your energy is valuable, your health is valuable, your identity is valuable, and your peace is priceless. Protect it wisely.